Good morning. Happy Halloween to all the real progressives out there. My name is Geoff Ginter. It's Halloween. It's October 31st, 8 o'clock. Let's make sure that we're actually streaming, and there we go. Okay. First off, I want to apologize to everyone for last week, and if anyone at the NSA is listening, or anyone at Facebook is listening, which I guess these days is kind of the same thing, don't shut me off this week. Don't do it. Now, obviously, I have no idea what happened last week. I don't have the slightest idea. For all I know, it was completely innocuous, but everything else on the internet was working as I was working furiously to try to get Facebook back up and running. Everything else was working. Internet was working. OBS was working. Facebook wasn't working. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll be a little bit of a trick or a treat tonight. I don't know. But thanks for everyone for sticking with me. And with that, I want to get to the first thing that I want to talk to today. Found this as I was just wandering the internet, and it made me giggle. So the AP is reporting that shoppers may face hard choices again on health marketplaces. Good God, man! There is trouble in the marketplace for healthcare. Ooh! And yet everyone knows exactly how I feel about this. The marketplace is the last place you want to have healthcare being taken care of. But, but this is the story that they're talking about. They're talking about how difficult it's going to be for individuals to be able to navigate the marketplace and what they're going to have to be able to deal with. And here's the main story. And it says things like, insurance shoppers likely will have several choices for individual health coverage this fall. The bad news? There's no guarantee they will cover certain doctors or prescriptions. So you might not be able to keep your doctor. I think everyone remembers hearing how horrible that was when you're not allowed to keep your doctor. And, of course, the idea of prescription drugs being covered seems to make a lot of Republicans and corporate Democrats just shrink in upon themselves at the very thought. But we continue with, plus, these plans can still be unaffordable for people who don't receive help from the ACA's income-based tax credits, and they often require patients to pay several $1,000s toward their care before most coverage starts. Does this start to paint a picture? Does this start to sound familiar? Healthcare for those who can afford it. And if you can't afford it, it's your fault. It's your fault that you're sick. It's your fault if you can't afford health care. You should have made different choices. Yada, yada, yada. Bullshit. These are political decisions. One simply has to decide from a monetarily sovereign nation with the wealth of resources that we have here in the United States. You make a political decision about who gets to access health care and who doesn't. Not an economic system. It's not an economic decision. It's not a macroeconomic reality that some people get to have health care and others don't. You leave it up to the marketplace. It'll be who can afford it and who can't. And if you can afford it, fantastic. You're in the 1%. If you can't, boo-hoo. Your fault. But it's a political decision. It is not a macroeconomic reality. And we all have the responsibility to be very clear about the difference between political choices, those arbitrary choices that we place upon ourselves, or more specifically, given how much engagement there is out there, how much we allow other people to determine our fate based upon their arbitrary decisions. We have to tell the difference between those and macroeconomic realities. Let's get started. All right, we're back. So the first thing I want to really talk about, the meat of what we're going to talk about is coming up. But before we really get into that, I want to talk about the upcoming election. These are the midterms coming up next Tuesday, November 6th. I want to talk about how important it is for everyone to get involved. I want to talk about how important it is for us to get involved, not only with voting, but also with engagement in between elections. You know, it's so important. The reason we are in where we are, if you look around you and you talk about the healthcare, disasters that we have, you talk about the gun violence that we have going on. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You want to talk about the inequality and the unemployment and the suicide rates. And you want to talk about what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Syria and the Middle East and South and Central America and all the refugees that are coming here and why we are to blame. This is one of the bitterest pills we all have to wrestle with. Decisions are made by those who show up, and we have not shown up in mass numbers for a very long time. We have left it up to people that we consider to be our betters, certainly people that we have considered to be more qualified to be able to deal with the issues out there, and look at what we've gotten in return. We turned over the keys to them, and it turns out they are irresponsible teenagers having a wonderful party, wrecking our environment, destroying our infrastructures, and we're blaming them. It's like parents with teenagers that run amok. The parents leave to be able to have a rightful night on the town for themselves. They hand over the keys to the teenagers, and the teenagers go, woo! And the parents come home, and they blame the teenagers. And yeah, the teenagers are the ones that did it. The teenagers have a huge part of the problem. They have a huge part of the blame. But so do the parents. It's a symbiotic relationship. And it's no different here. We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, support the general welfare. It's us. It's all of us. We cannot just hope to God that the people that we send to Washington are going to take care of it for us. Because they're going to do their job. They are going to do their job. The question is, what job is that? They will listen to those who show up. And the oligarchs always show up. On time, every time. There are no exceptions. They're invested. Literally and figuratively, as well as monetarily. They are invested. They got their eyes on the prize, and they're going for it. So the question is, are we going to allow them to be the only ones in the room doing the talking? Are we going to allow them, notice the words I use, allow them to be the only ones making the decisions? They are not your betters. They are not your overlords. They do not have anything that you don't have except money. Money and organization. And that's it. That's all they have. We have numbers, and if we have organization on top of that, we win. So I want to be able to make sure that people understand you must show up. What I want for Tuesday is for 100% voter participation. If you are eligible to vote, go and vote. Do not let them stop you. Do not let them have any excuse. You show up and you vote. And for those who are already disenfranchised, the only way we're going to make sure that we reverse that and make sure it never happens again is you still come out. I want to see everyone come out. In Georgia, Louisiana, in the Indian lands, if you have been disenfranchised, come out anyway. Have a show of force. Scare the living shit out of them. The only way we're going to beat them when they have privatized the vote, when they have allowed voting machines with proprietary software so that we can investigate and audit the results, when they have no paper trails in so many instances, And in the case of Tim Canova, after the fact, they just destroy the evidence. And they get away with it. We have to show up. It is as simple as that. There's no other way around it. You want a different result? Play a different game. Staying home and yelling at a television screen is the game that I played for 47 years. I can't do it anymore. I'll go insane. I'll destroy myself. So I do this. Show up. And when the voting is over, no matter what the result is, keep showing up. You don't like the results? Organize. Talk to your friends. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to the people who don't believe the things you believe, and talk to them. Give them a perspective they won't find on Fox News. And don't give up on them. They are not your enemies. These people are allies in waiting. They have been listening to the only entity that has been showing up again and again and again, and it's not in their best interest, but there's no one else doing the talking. So you do the talking. You be the change that you desperately need to see in the world. You can do it. I believe in you. And it's desperately needed. Every social, geopolitical, and environmental ill you can think of will not be solved by the people who are in power or are currently seeking power. I don't care who you're talking about. I don't care how much you like them or you like their politics. They are not going to save you. You got basically two camps there. You got the ones who don't want to. They're working for the ones who show up. And the ones who show up don't give a shit about you. So they're listening to the ones who pay them. That's camp number one. They don't want to do it. Camp number two are the ones who might actually want to do it, but have two major handicaps. One, they don't know how, because they don't understand the economics of how to do it. And number two, they don't have the full-throated support of the people. These people, the ones who can be moved to do the right thing, aren't going to, because they are drowning in a sea of opposition. And they are drowning in an endless, boundless ocean. We are on the coast. We send them out into the ocean. And they are drowning, and the sharks are everywhere. And there's our candidate in the middle of that maelstrom, trying to get something done. And it can't happen because we're on the shore and we need to be in there right with them. We need to stop thinking and believing that we are voting for someone and sending them to Washington. No, we are voting for someone and they are taking us to Washington with them. But it takes us to be willing to do that. We have to be willing to put up or shut up. And the clock is ticking. Environmentally speaking, we're already out of time. We are now fighting for our very survival. So you got to do something. You got to get involved. It can't just be every 4 years. It can't be every 2 years. It's got to be all the time. And clearly, you're going to have to take time for yourself. You're going to have to take some breather time. And you may change what you do from time to time. I don't know if I'm always going to be doing live streams. I might just do other things later on. I don't know. But I'm always going to be involved. I'm always going to be doing something. And since I don't know what works, I'm going to try as many things as I possibly can. I need you to do the same. You all have a voice. You all have something unique and special that is about you, and we need you. The movement needs you. You want to come to Real Progressives and help us out? Please do. We need your help. You want to do it on your own? Please do. Do something. The closest I will ever come to telling anyone what to do, the closest I will ever come, is to tell you that you must get involved. I will not tell you how to do that. I will give you numerous suggestions. But you must get involved and find some way to remain involved while maintaining your own sanity. Second, you must vote. I will never, ever tell you who to vote for. I will never tell you that you must vote for one of the two parties. I will never tell you that you should vote for third party. I will never tell you to form a third party. But you must vote. You must step up to that plate and you must pull that lever. That you must do. If you want to vote for yourself, you want to write in your friend's name, you want to make it a protest vote, that's fine. But show up. Show up and vote. And if, like I said, if you can't vote, if you've already been disenfranchised, show up anyway. Bring all your friends who have been disenfranchised and bring them to your local polling place and just stand there. Protest, put signs, sing songs, do whatever. Make it loud, make it annoying, make it really inconvenient for the people that are around. Except for those that are coming in to vote. Those, right this way, sir. Your booth is right here. You must get involved. You must vote. That's as far as I'm ever going to tell anyone what to do. You have the free will to tell me to fuck off. You have the free will to completely disregard what I have to say. That is your right. But it comes with consequences. People tell me all the time, well, Geoff, I'm just not political. That's fine. Being political is not fun. What I'm doing here right now is not fun. It takes me away from my family who miss me right now. This is not fun for me. It's not fun for me to get on Twitter, and just read all bunch of crap and have to respond to this, that, and the other. That's not fun. You want me to have fun? I want to pick up a guitar. I got a whole studio here I would like to be able to use for what its original function was. That would be me having fun. Instead, I do this. Because it's necessary. Because people are in pain. Because they're suffering everywhere I turn. But there is hope. We are fighting for our lives. But by that very definition, that means there is life. And for as long as there is life, there is possibilities. For as long as there is life, there's the possibility of love. For as long as there is love, there is the possibility of moving a civilization forward. Right now, we're seeing things disappearing right, left, and center. It doesn't have to be that way. Those are political decisions. And because there are political decisions, that gives me hope. Because a decision can be reversed. Just ask anyone on the Supreme Court. Decisions can be reversed. Bad decisions can be reversed. New decisions can take their place. And if we come to the table and demand what is ours, then we got a shot. Don't you want to take it? Don't you want to go for it? I do. I do it for my kids. I do it for my wife. I do it for the people I love. I do it for my friends. I do it for my enemies. I don't give a shit. If we get single-payer health care, that means everyone gets it. I don't want anyone to go without health care. I fight with insurance companies every day. And it's not necessary. It offers absolutely no benefit to the patients. Not one. It's a middleman without a means. It's a middleman without a necessity. So we get to something like this. Medicare Advantage's popularity shows Americans won't like single payer. This is the kind of thing that we are up against right now. This is in Forbes magazine. This is them telling us bullshit like this. Democrats hope their advocacy of single-payer health care will help them in the upcoming midterm elections. More than half the Democrats running for seats in the House back Medicare for All. Maybe, maybe not. I wonder how many of them are giving lip service to it, but we'll see. It remains to be seen if their embrace of government-run healthcare, where private coverage is banned for anything considered medically necessary, will prove a winner. Historically, Americans have favored privately administered health plans when they've had the choice. That's even true for progressives' favorite government program, Medicare itself. This is bullshit. Insurers who offer Medicare Advantage plans also have a strong financial incentive to keep the quality of care they provide high and the cost of that care low. If insurers spend less on medical services and overhead costs than they are paid, they keep the difference. So they have every reason to find more efficient ways to treat patients. Show of hands. How many people could spot the bullshit there? Show of hands. Anyone? When you financially incentivize something, when your profits are predicated on the situation, you're already fucked. It's only a question of degrees. If you are in healthcare, and I've said this again, I will say it again. If you are in healthcare, your first question must be, what is in the best interest of my patients? And if you are in business, your first question is, how can I get the most profit off of this venture? And since what is in the best interest of my patients is very often a money-losing proposition, if you are in healthcare, you cannot be in business. And if you are in business, you cannot be in healthcare. One is anathema to the other. That's just the way it goes. And for every instance where you can show me where someone actually did put patients before profits and still turned a profit, I will show you 100 others where it goes exactly the opposite. A business as usual, as it is right now. 45,000 people die because they can't access health care at all. But you fix the ACA, you make sure it has all the money that it needs to be able to get private insurance for everyone. You might mitigate that number, but you will not even touch the greater problem of 220,000 people on average, depending upon which poll you go through. It could be up to 440,000 people who die every year, not every 10 years, every year, because they die because of for-profit healthcare. The medical errors is the third leading cause of death in the United States. They care more about their bottom line than they care about your life. So everything this person is talking about is complete and utter bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit. Because she thinks, it's all wonderful. Y'all want single-payer health care. But wouldn't you rather have the private industry take care of it? Americans always gravitate to that if they have the choice. But just because they have the choice doesn't mean it's a good idea. They can give them the choice between what's actually life and death, but I wrap it up in a candy bar, and people will go for the candy bar. But that's just death on the installment plan. So you got to be careful. You got to read between the lines. You can't just simply take a look at something like this and think, "Oh, wow, maybe I should think twice." Oh, Americans might not like single-payer health care. And why would that be? Why would they not like single-payer health care? I just don't know. But God knows it is very popular. CNBC, shows 70% of the population love single-payer health care. The Hill, 70% of the population love Medicare For All. Yahoo Finance, 70% of the population. The Week, more than half of Republicans support single-payer health care. And here we are, on Physicians for a National Health Plan. What's that down there on the bottom? 51.9% of Republicans support Medicare for All, a single-payer health care system. 70.1 in total support. This scares the living shit out of them. These kinds of numbers scare the absolute bejesus out of them. Do you have any idea how much money is made in healthcare? But if we allow the government not to run the healthcare, this is not what we're talking about. We can talk about the merits of government-run healthcare all day long, and I will sit down with anyone and have that discussion. But what Medicare for All is proposing, what a single payer is offering, is just have one insurance company. One. And that's the federal government. The only entity that doesn't require revenue of any description, and as sure as shit does not need any kind of profit. Any private business needs those things. It needs a revenue stream to be able to operate, and it needs to be able to turn a profit to continue to operate. So they will always be looking for those profit margins. And if you get an altruistic company, they'll be satisfied with modest profit margins, and they'll make sure they pay their employees, and they'll make sure that the employees have a good working environment. You might find altruistic companies like that. They do exist. But that is now incumbent upon you trusting individuals who are in charge. You are at the mercy of them. What kind of power do you have over them? Well, if you don't like your grocery store, you have a lot of power. You can simply shop elsewhere. Buying groceries is not complicated. If you don't like your automobile manufacturer, you don't like what Honda does, you don't like what Chevy does, you can buy a different make and model. You don't like the auto dealership where you bought it from, you can buy it from somewhere else. You have a lot of purchase power with your hard-earned dollars for buying goods and services, for those things that are in actual fact goods and services. You do not have that power with healthcare because it is entirely too complicated. And when you need it, you are in no position to be able to negotiate for it. You cannot negotiate when you are sick. You cannot negotiate when you are near death. So you cannot allow the free market to be within a galactic zip code of such a system. They need profit, then they can't be in healthcare. It's as simple as that. And if anyone needs it explained more complicated than that, I don't know what to tell you. It really is that simple. People that are involved in healthcare have to be paid. No one is disputing that. It's one of the biggest arguments I get against it. Oh, it's socialism, and then you run out of other people's money. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the federal government that creates its own currency that doesn't require an income or a revenue, is going to pay the bills. Doctors will still be able to work for themselves. Hospitals will still be independent. But just as they have to negotiate prices with existing insurance companies, including the federal government with Medicare and Medicaid, don't tell me that they don't negotiate with Aetna. Don't tell me they don't negotiate with Horizon. Of course they do. Doctors, hospitals, etc., they all make their bills, and the insurance company negotiates the shit out of that. There's no difference. The federal government will simply be the only insurance company. There won't be any others. And if you want to talk about having insurance companies for cosmetic purposes or what have you, fine, whatever. But it shouldn't happen. You know why? Because the government doesn't need your money to fund it. It simply decides that it's important. It decides that all healthcare decisions are important. And they will just dedicate their resources to doing it. The cost is immaterial. The availability of resources is material. And when they decide that healthcare is a right, that you should pay for nothing out of pocket, from womb to tomb, no matter what your medical condition is, and it can be paid 100%. And we could still have hospitals that are like Hyatt hotels, and doctors can still be in the 1% if that's what we negotiate. These are political decisions. It's not macroeconomic reality. You make your plan. You assess your resources. You make your payments. And then you adjust taxation for inflation. That's the order of operations. But no, they want us to be afraid. GOP revives Medicare scare tactics as election nears. Why would they do such a thing? I wonder. The Democrats' plan means that after a life of hard work and sacrifice, seniors would no longer be able to depend on the benefits they were promised. Under the Democrats' plan, today's Medicare would be forced to die. And the thing that I love more than anything is this one. In a speech to the National Press Club on October 8th, House Speaker Paul Ryan, thankfully soon to be ex, said almost exactly the same thing. Democrats call it Medicare for All because it sounds good, but in reality, it actually ends Medicare in its current form. No shit, Sherlock! We're trying to end it in its current form. It doesn't cover everyone. By virtue of actually covering everyone, we have now changed it from its current form. We wanted to include dental. We wanted to include prescription drugs. We want everything to be free, out of pocket, no fee for service. Whatever it is your medical needs are, this bill will cover it. That, by its very nature, changes it from what it currently is. And that's a good thing. We don't want it to be the way it is. That's why the bill is improved Medicare for All. They want you to be afraid by telling you that the little scraps that we have allowed you to hold on to tenaciously will be taken away. And they just want you to be left with that fear. Something is going to change. Something you have taken for granted is going to change. And they're going to change it. And they tell it to you in a scary way so that you will be on their side instead of their side. It will change Medicare as we know it. Are you shitting me? Of course it's going to. And thank God. We're going to expand it. We're going to have it cover everything. That's the point. Soon to be ex-House of Representative, remember, Paul Ryan. Because this.
So having personal retirement accounts is another way of making a future retiree benefits more secure for their retirement. And also, do you believe that personal retirement accounts as a component to a system of solvency does help improve solvency? Because when you have a personal retirement account policy, it's accompanied with a benefit offset. With that feature in place, do you believe that personal retirement accounts can help us achieve solvency for the system and make those future retiree benefits more secure?
Well, I wouldn't say that the pay-as-you-go benefits are insecure in the sense that there's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to somebody. The question is, how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created which those benefits are employed to purchase? So it's not a question of security. It's a question of the structure of a financial system which assures that the real resources are created for retirement as distinct from the cash. The cash itself is nice to have, but it's got to be in the context of the real resources being created at the time those benefits are paid so that you can purchase real resources with the benefits, which of course are cash.
Mm-hmm.
Now, no one loves humiliating Paul Ryan more than I do. It's a fringe benefit, the likes of which, just makes me feel like I got a shower in puppy dog love. It's just stone cold awesome. But that is, for those who don't know, that's Alan Greenspan. He was chairman of the Fed, and don't look to me to tell you that he is a wonderful guy. He ain't. But that doesn't mean that he's not telling the truth. You got to be very careful when we demonize people, and then therefore say that everything that they have ever said ever will forever be suspect. Now, there's one thing I want to show you about that. Where is he? Oh, yes. Because Greenspan also said this. When Alan Greenspan was testifying before Congress in 1997, on the marvels of the economy he was running, he said straight out that one of the bases of its economic success was imposing what he called greater worker insecurity. If workers are more insecure, that's very healthy for the society, because if workers are insecure, they won't ask for wages, they won't go on strike, they won't call for benefits, they'll serve the masters gladly and passively. And that's optimal for corporations' economic health. At the time, everyone regarded Greenspan's comments as reasonable, judging by the lack of reaction and the great acclaim he enjoyed. I remember in the 90s, I don't remember him saying that in the 90s, but clearly he did. And I've seen him say it as well. But what I remember mostly in the moment in the 90s, I'm 49 years old now. I was very much alive and aware in the 90s. I remember that Alan Greenspan was very well thought of, very well respected on both sides of the aisle. Because at that time, both sides of the aisle is very much like they are now, in as much as they both think that the free market has the solution for everything. No matter what your problem is, no matter what your ill is, the free market will solve it. And if it doesn't, then it was never meant to be solved in the first place. Yes, sorry, that's really big pile of bullshit. But that was Alan Greenspan, saying that one of the things he was most proud of is making sure that workers are insecure. Making sure that workers are insecure, making sure that they're not quite sure where their next meal is coming from. Can't really tell if this is going to be their last paycheck or not. And what's happened as a result of all that? Right now, we got 40 to 60% of the entire population either in poverty or one bad paycheck away from falling into it. And what do people do when they are insecure? These things pile up. I don't know where my next paycheck is coming from. Turns into, I don't know where I'm going to be living next month. Turns into, I don't know what I'm going to be eating tomorrow. People like that are not well-adjusted individuals. Why do you think we have the violence that we have? Why do you think we have the xenophobia that we have? Why do you think we have the shootings that we have? I promise you this. If you have a problem with gun violence in this country like I do, you have to be sure, if you want to solve it, you are not going to solve it simply by getting rid of the guns, though you must. There is no moral argument for putting weapons of war in the hands of civilians. There is no moral argument whatsoever. For those of you who are Second Amendment fetishites, look to the decision of the Supreme Court versus Heller, where, what's his name? Supreme Court just recently passed away. Scalia, who wrote the winning opinion, affirmed the right of the state to be able to ban weapons. That you had the right to a handgun as a means of protection. A handgun only. But that the federal government was quite correct to be able to, for the length of time that it did, ban assault rifles. It gets to decide what kind of weaponry gets into the hands of citizens. And for those who say you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, screw you. Think outside the box. Don't tell me something can't be done simply because you don't know how to do it. You don't know how to go to the moon, but we did it. It was done 40 years ago, and you still couldn't tell me the physics of how it happens. But something is possible, and you don't know how to do it, so don't tell me that something can't be done. Prove to me that it can't be done. I'm tired of that kind of bullshit. You don't want it to be done. That's the truth. That's the bottom line. You don't want it to be done. And you want me to believe that, therefore, it can't be done. Of course it can. Of course it can. It's just going to take outside-the-box thinking. And you know what? You're going to have to change your thinking, too. But for those who say that we need to be able to get rid of the guns because of the gun violence, I absolutely agree. But you will not get rid of the violence or the desire to cause violence until you deal with austerity, until you deal with poverty, until you deal with economic insecurity, until you deal with the growing mental health care problem in this country, all of which covered under single-payer health care. We have a multifaceted problem when it comes to gun culture, when it comes to mass shootings. And you cannot solve a multifaceted problem by dealing with the lowest hanging fruit. The most obvious solution, get rid of the guns. Duh, of course. But that is simply the low-hanging fruit. It is not the overall problem. It is not the be-all, end-all. You must deal with the root of the problem. The desire to cause that kind of pain because people themselves are in pain. We need to expand our consciousness. We need to expand our compassion. We need to take our heads out of our ass, out of the sand, wherever it happens to be, and take a look at what's being done in our name internationally. We got half the country saying how horrible it is that refugees are coming in. That section of the population needs to be awoken to what's happening in the rest of the world that we are causing, that is making people want to flee. These are multifaceted problems, all of which are political. All of which are political. They have their roots in politics. So we have to get involved. We don't have a choice if we want to change things. There is no choice. So you need to understand the economics. When they tell you that single-payer health care can't possibly work here, here is my, darling Congressman Tom MacArthur.
It works in other small countries, not in countries of this size.
That's him saying how single-payer health care, works in some small countries, but it can't possibly work in a large country like this. He's talking about economies of scale. I don't know how he can possibly sit down with a turd that huge in his ass. I honestly don't know. It's not about cost. We are a monetarily sovereign nation. You must understand MMT. I've explained it, on numerous occasions. Don't really have as much time as I would like to be able to dedicate tonight to really explaining MMT. But basically, what we call the elevator pitch is this. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution mandates that only Congress can create the U.S. dollar. No one else can. Banks can't create the dollar. They create debt. What they do is something different. When the U.S. government spends its money that it creates, that is high-powered money, it does not need to return to the government until it collects taxes. And if it runs deficits, it doesn't need to have all of it back. For what is the deficit? The deficit is just the difference between how much the government spends in a year versus how much it takes back in taxes in a year. It creates its own currency. This is not a problem. So Article 1, Section 8 mandates three things specifically. 1, that Congress creates the currency. 2, it sets the value of the currency. 3, it imposes taxes. So let's say that we start a new country. We form a new government. We've got a military. We've got everything things that we need, and we need to provision ourselves. As government, we need certain things. We need roads. We need, bridges. We need infrastructure. We need schools and hospitals. We need all manner of things. Well, what are we going to do? How are we going to get that? Well, history shows us that we can do it in basically one of two ways. We can enslave a population, ours or someone else's, and get them to do it. But if we want to be civilized, then we will pay people to do it. We will hire people. So we are government, and Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution says that we shall create our own currency. So great, we have created a currency, and we now want to hire a whole group of people to be able to build all these things for us. And we say, I want you to build us these roads. And you say, great. And they negotiate a price, and the government says, we're going to pay you, $1 million, U.S. And they say, great. What's a U.S. dollar? And I say, oh, yes, we're a new government. Well, these pieces of paper, we're going to pay you 1 million of these, and you're going to build all the roads in the country. And they say, no effing way, dude. I have no idea what that is. I have no need for it. I'm quite happy with the British pound or doing barter, whatever it happens to be. I don't need that. That is nothing to me. And the U.S. government says, are you sure? Because the Constitution also says that I'm going to levy taxes. And I say, yeah, you're going to levy taxes. I've got money here for you. And I say, well, yeah, but I'm not accepting that money. I'm the government. I create my own currency, and I impose the tax, and I'm going to tell you in what currency I will accept payment from those taxes. And I'm only accepting it in U.S. dollars. And if you don't pay me in U.S. dollars every year or every 4 times a year whenever I impose a tax, if you don't pay me in U.S. dollars, I'm going to fine you. I'm going to confiscate your belongings. And if that's not good enough, I'm going to send you to jail. You don't want to go to jail? Pay up in U.S. dollars. Well, now we have an entire population that is more than happy to work for U.S. dollars, eager, in fact, to work for U.S. dollars. So now the government has now created an economy that includes what? Unemployment, because the government hasn't employed everyone to do these things, but everyone has a tax obligation. So now everyone is looking for jobs, and they want it in U.S. dollars because everyone has a tax obligation that can only be extinguished in U.S. dollars. The second thing that the Constitution says is that they shall tell you how much $1 is worth. And for a while, we were on a gold standard. So the federal government promised for a certain amount of time that every dollar will be worth a certain amount of gold. So if they had a certain amount of gold in reserves, they could not put more currency into circulation than they had in gold reserves. The math, is very complicated to explain, so to keep it simple, what I normally say, the explanation I give is the federal government says that $1 is worth 1 pound of gold. I don't know that any dollar has ever been worth an entire pound of gold, but for the sake of keeping the math simple, we have 200 billion pounds of gold, and we have made a 1-to-1 ratio, $1, 1 pound of gold. So 200 billion pounds of gold, I can't spend more than $200 billion into the economy without reneging on my promise to exchange all that money for gold. If I overspend, I have devalued the dollar. If everyone decides to do a run and take gold, well, I don't have enough. So if I needed to spend beyond my ability to have in gold reserves, if I needed to spend $220 billion in gold, in currency, I would have to take $20 billion in your tax revenue and re-spend that into the economy. I have now technically spent $220 billion, and yet there still only remains $200 billion in circulation. Hence, I have now defended my gold reserves, and I needed your tax dollars to be able to do that. I needed to tax, I needed to borrow at one point to be able to spend. But if we're not on a gold standard anymore, then that goes bye-bye. We are no longer financially constrained. It doesn't matter how much something costs. It matters if we have the resources to accomplish our goals. That's what's important. Not something arbitrary like money. Money that our government creates out of thin air. Congress sets the agenda. They create their priorities. They call it a budget. It's a set of priorities. They determine how much it's going to cost. They look into their resources and make sure that they have enough resources to accomplish it. And then they spend the money, and the money now becomes real. The central bank in the U.S., that's the Federal Reserve, the central bank and the Treasury work together in tandem to be able to make sure that payments go out and that payments clear. That's it. It is really that simple. But because we used to be on a gold standard, and we were up until 1973, there's an entire generation of people that believe that borrowing and taxing is how we pay for shit. And it's just not. And it hasn't been for 47 years. We need to understand the difference between political realities and macroeconomic realities. Political decisions versus what's actually possible in the real economy. We can have single-payer health care. We can have a federal jobs guarantee. We can go 100% green energy. We can end neoliberalism. We can end industrialized farming. We can come up with a way to salvage what little we have left of our environment and still provide a higher quality of standard of living for people. We can invest in R&D to make sure that we can still have GDP and still have a higher cost of living and not deplete our resources. Just because you haven't thought of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, doesn't mean it's not possible. So pay someone, pay the smart people to come up with the solutions that we haven't thought of yet. And by the way, take some of that money and invest it in our future in education. Stop funding education through the taxing system of the states because states are currency users. The federal government is financially untethered, not the states. The minute you let something be funded by an entity that doesn't create its own currency, you are creating lack. You are creating disparity. Only the federal government can pay for the things that are truly important to the health and well-being of the nation. Defense, healthcare, infrastructure, education, research and development in all these areas to make sure that we are always moving forward with an eye towards our resources. Only the federal government can spend sufficiently on green energy to make sure that we get off fossil fuels now, while we can. Only the federal government can ensure that we get off of industrialized farming now, while we can, and still feed the nation and the world for all that. only the federal government, the only entity that is not financially constrained. This Tuesday, all of this is on the line. All of it. And if you want even a taste of it to come true, you're going to have to be the one to push your elected officials to do it. The ones that tell you that the free market is a solution, fuck that. I'm sorry. The free market doesn't care about you. The free market cares about itself. The free market cares about profit. If the free market was going to solve anything that I've been talking about, it would have done so already. If it cared about your wages, it would have given you raises. As GDP went up, you would have shared in that. But they didn't, because they don't care about you. If they cared about the environment, they would never have dumped so much as a can of sewage into our oceans and our rivers. They would never have pumped CO2 into the atmosphere if they cared. But they don't. They would never, ever have allowed for insurance companies to take over healthcare. But they did, because they don't care. They want their money. They want their power. They want everything. And the only thing standing between them and us is us. Theoretically, that's the government. The government is supposed to be standing between the people and business. And remember the Constitution. We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, support the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. I ask you, where is the justice in our system right now? Where we have for-profit prisons, where we have the school-to-prison pipeline, where we have economic disparities of criminal natures, where we have disparities of distribution of wealth, of health care, of education. Where is the justice? How is there blessings of liberty in any of that? It is the job of government to provide these things. And we are the government. We send representatives. Yes, it's a representative democracy. It is a republic. But that doesn't mean that it is in the hands solely, exclusively of the ones we send there. To everyone that is running for office right now, I'm speaking directly to you. You're going to Congress. You're going to the House of Representatives. You've got 2 years. I want you to think about what you can accomplish in 2 years if you didn't care if you got reelected. What could you accomplish? If you're going, I want you to stop caring about re-election. It's unimportant. It doesn't matter. Assume that you're going for 2 years and that's it. Do not fundraise. If you do a good job, we'll do the fundraising for you. Your job is to make sure that you do your job, and we'll be the ones that tell you what that is. I don't want you to raise a dime. I don't want you to lift a finger in fundraising. I want you to be on the floor of the House of Representatives. Everyone's heard the story about how they spend 8 hours a day fundraising. Almost all their time is taken up in fundraising. They don't have the time to stay in meetings to learn about the legislation they're supposed to be voting on. Do you honestly think that that's an accident? Do you honestly think that that's not done on purpose, by design? None of this is by accident. It's no accident that you have to be rich or have some type of mechanism, a two-income household with health care benefits, so that if someone doesn't work for 2 years, they can scrape by and get it. You're not going to be of the people and be able to do that. That's by design. It's by design that they keep the people who actually go there distracted and have to raise money. Why? So that you can stay in power another 2 years? Who cares? Get done what you can done in 2 years and go home if that's what it takes. And if we like you, we'll vote for you again. And then you'll get another 2 years. Stop caring about re-election. You're going because they're suffering. You're going to alleviate that suffering. And if those aren't the reasons you're going, you do not have my vote. Well, it's getting to be about that time. I believe Savage Joy is coming up. Happy Halloween. Hope I didn't scare you all too much. I showered. That should be sufficient. I love you all very much. Remember that. Remember the love. It's the reason that you fight. It's the reason that when you fight, you will be on the right path. Like I said, I'll never tell you what to do. But if you hold on to love, you'll be able to fight the right fights. That's all you can control. I love you all very much. I'll see you next week. Happy Halloween. Bye-bye. Hi, thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting Real Progressives. If you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe to our various channels. If you want to help us in our fight against neoliberalism and to help create a real deal for the people of the United States, then drop us a line. Find out how you can fit in. Or be a monthly patron. No matter what you do, please get involved. Catch you next time.